Hello everyone, welcome to the Blue Lounge. My name is Izzat Arif.
And my name is Alison John.
In case you're wondering, the Blue Lounge is a space, an area where we would talk about the debates that were live streamed and the debates that happened, which was live streamed that everyone did watch. And we'll be covering debates and rounds that happened in the QIUP World Universities Peace Invitational Debate 2017. So we'll generally just be talking about what happened in the debate. Maybe we'll have some thoughts. If you have any thoughts of your own, you are more than welcome to share it under the comment section below. Right? So let's start off with the first round of the preliminary rounds of the WUPIT 2017. Ali?
So the motion that was debated in this round is this House believes that post-colonial state should strictly limit the availability of Western media in terms of film, music, and television. The four teams that are debated in this round is in opening government, we have APU Help 1. In opening opposition, we have Oxford Composite. On closing government, we have Malaya A. And on closing opposition, we have IUFB. The verdict of that debate was that the first was given to the opening government, second was given to opening opposition, third was given to closing government, and fourth was given to closing opposition. Just
a minor clarification. So if you're watching like a debate for the first time and you're a bit weirded out that there are four teams in the debate, this tournament will be conducted in the British parliamentary format. And in this format, we have four teams. So we have two teams defending the government bench, we have two teams defending the opposition bench, and all four teams are individual teams who are competing to be the best team in the room. So essentially what happens is that the judge will be assigning the rank of each team. Opening government, as happened in the debate before, opening government gets a first, opening opposition gets a second, closing government gets a third, and closing opposition gets a fourth. There's a lot of technical aspect as to how do you compare each team, how do you rank each team, how does opening government beat closing government, and vice versa. But the general benchmark is the team that is the most persuasive in getting the judge to believe or not believe in the motion, that is the team that ought to get a first. So with that being said, let's take a closer look into the debate that happened, and let's start with the opening government. Ellie?
Yeah, so the opening government won with this debate. And I think the first thing I'd like to note was the few jokes that the Prime Minister made in the beginning. So because this debate was generally about Western culture and local cultures, the example that was given in the Prime Minister is that we don't get why bands like 1975 gets more airtime in comparison to local Malaysian bands like Alicat, which is probably as good as our international bands. Or the fact that we are forced to read The Great Gatsby in school, but not Malaysian love stories that include nasi lemak in these stories. So I think though these examples are essentially funny and humorous, but it does show the way in which local communities, especially post-colonial states, perceive Western cultures to be more superior. And one of the arguments that opening government argued is that the way in which we view Western culture is how we put more credibility upon these individuals, and to think that the Western films or Western music are better than local culture, local arts. So what do you think about this argument?
I think the argument is fair. I think it's plausible to believe that local cultures, to a very large extent, has a different way of being perceived or being liked within local societies as compared to, big budget movies in Hollywood, or hell, it doesn't even have to be West. Like, for the sake of the argument, it can also be applied to Bollywood, right? Like, people usually compare like movies in Bollywood and also our local films as well. I think the argument is fine. I think maybe perhaps the responses towards the argument by opening opposition was pretty decent as well. Like, the general line of rebuttal was that it entirely assumes that people in Malaysia, for example, don't really appreciate these arts and these these local arts as well. And there are a lot of different levels of analysis to disprove this. Like, it could just be generally exposure. Like, for example, we're Malaysians. We were colonized like a good 50 plus years ago. And I can still see a lot of people in Malaysia right now who appreciate Alicat,
who like goes to like local indie bands,
local indie bands
and shows,
and like art galleries in Malaysia right now, especially in the Klang Valley, are thriving by like local cultures. And there's a lot of, and like in this, because there's just exposure, you know, you're just generally exposed to a lot of these things. Sure, you have the option to look at Western media, but at the same time, you also gain the exposure of, let it be friends around you who listen to these local things, or just your parents telling you about it. So that's just one, right? Exposure in general, and a lot of other things as well. Like for example, argued that like in a democracy, like states have the incentive to make sure that they take care of how they treat local cultures, because or else like people locally would have a problem with it. Oh, you're not liking our culture, blah 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 blah, things like that. So the state then has an incentive to make sure that they don't do so much to outshine local cultures as opposed to Western cultures. So yeah, those are some of the things and responses that I thought I appreciated from opening opposition.
So like opening opposition also talked about how Western culture, Western art generally bring in more progressive values, and how like it serves as a counter narrative to conservative states that are also consideredly post-colonial states. And I think the response or the question that was prompted by closing government was also a very fair question. So closing government then said that if Western cultures are able to progress, why can't post-colonial state? Why is it mutually exclusive to Western states? And why can't post-colonial states also have their way in which to progress? There are a lot of movements local movements on the ground that talk about sexuality, for example, or gender orientation, for example, that are headed by local groups and local leaders. So what do you think within that exchange? Because like it is fair for opening opposition to talk about to posit that Western cultures are very progressive and thus help, you know, incite progressive values in local context, whereas it is also fair for closing government to say like, oh, that's not mutually exclusive, that we are also able to progress ourselves, saying there is an incentive for us to do so.
I think so. I personally can't make that call. I think both sides of the argument were very well analyzed. I can see reasons why people would believe the government bench when they argued that, you know, local cultures also have the inherent need to fight against values that makes them feel underrepresented and all that, right? But at the same time, I think opposition did a good job in illustrating to me that a lot of these values and genesis of these values just happen to come from Western cultures as well, right? Like it all started from the West, right? I think it depends on how the judge would look at these lines of analysis. If you ask me personally, I'll probably lean towards the opposition a little bit. I don't know, that it could just be because of my own personal bias perception that the West was the one who started all this.
Inside the discussions about LGBT, inside discussions about like sexuality and gender orientation.
Exactly.
Seeing that that's one of the closing government's argument. One of the other argument that closing government had was the incentive for foreign film industries, or i.e. Hollywood, to ensure that there's better representation of minority cultures if they do want to enter into markets where post-colonial states actively censor Western arts and films and TV. So I think that to a very large extent, a lot of teams in this debate talk about incentive. And I think generally one of the most biggest incentive that closing government did provide is that more often than not, foreign film companies and industries don't have an incentive to present minority cultures in the best light. So they think that this policy within this debate, where post-colonial states actively restrict or actively censor, that means in order for foreign films to break into the industries of these post-colonial states, the incentive is there. What do you think the response from closing opposition is like?
The response from closing opposition? I think generally the response from closing opposition was that the impacts of this,
of censorship,
like the impacts of not censorship, like in response to the extension, right? Like in response to the incentive, like the impact just I'm not entirely sure like
Yeah.
whether it was established or not,
Yeah.
right? Like I think that was what was questioned by closing opposition.
Yeah.
You know, like, is there really a huge incentive by the West, for example, to make sure that there's one Chinese actor inside their movies or not? Or is there whether there's a huge incentive or not for them to use the settings of the Himalayas or using the settings of India, for example?
And this was brought up by examples of movies like Avatar or The Ghost Shell or The Great Wall, where these movies are supposed to portray Asian cultures, for example, are largely whitewashed. Therefore, like, don't know where, like, then where is the incentive like?
I mean, like, and personally speaking, to be fair, if I was Hollywood, I'm already making a lot of money. So, but speaking of the closing opposition, right? So, if we're talking about extensions, I think what closing opposition argued was a very interesting idea. And like, even while we don't have the recording of the oral adjudication just now, like even the judge just now noted that it was a very well analyzed argument, which was that now post-colonial states would make it easier for them to use anti-Western rhetoric
or anti-colonial sentiments,
anti-colonial sentiments by using this policy in order to either censor or in order to just deem something, oh, this is very Western, therefore it goes within our policy, so we can just silence you or like we can do something about it.
It's a slippery slope argument.
It's a slippery slope argument. So I think the argument was very well made because the closing opposition did a good job in illustrating to me the trend of most states, especially post-colonial states, to use legislation and to use policies in order to silence minorities. And like the way they justified was very interesting and like, had a lot of angles to it. You know, like for example, oh, this is too West, or this is seditious, you know, things like that, right?
And I think this argument rings very true because it does happen in reality, right? So even if you don't even if you don't take into account like post-colonial states per se, but if you look at countries like Russia or countries like China, where there is a large, like a big incentive from governments to like clamp down on certain values that don't necessarily coincide with local culture or local beliefs. Governments, as such, do take advantage of censorships to censor whatever forms of values that that the government thinks that don't really coincide with the government's agenda, or essentially what locals think within that context.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it's a very impactful argument too, because it really speaks about the consequences of government control, whether people have the liberty to say things after that.
Because like teams, I think most teams in this debate also sort of conceded that like Western culture or Western values are very broad, right? So it's not just about like progressive values, but there are also other broad values that may be the same beliefs that local like post-colonial states individual like believe in. But that's why like it's easy for governments, oppressive governments as such, to label everything as Western values or everything as progressive values. That's why censorship becomes very dangerous in this instance.
So I think generally all arguments in this entire debate was very well.
The debate was very good. It was very engaging.
It was a very engaging debate. Even the judge himself said, and I personally believe this as well, like it really could have gone either way. I can imagine and rationalize CO getting first. I can imagine rationalizing OO getting first, CG, CO, like, and just imagine the kind of headache that the judge panel would have. I can just easily imagine that one panel has 1, 2, 3, 4. One panel has 2, 1, 3, 4, and just trying to resolve that. Oh my God, So it was a good debate. Like generally, it was close. Even the chair just now said so. So
that's all the time we have.
So lunch is lunch is being served now. Round 2 will start immediately after lunch, and you can bet that you will see the two of us as well after round 2. So see you after round 2.
Stay tuned.